gentlemen, we are live. Episode number lucky 13. Hanging in there. How you feeling, Brad?
Hey, feeling pretty good. Excited for this week's episode. I feel like I had two back-to-back kind of like episodes for me as far as like the discs, which is fine that we expect that. I can't love every disc, but this week I'm excited for. Had a much-needed good week in the field this week with both discs, and considering one of them bumping out one of my favorite discs, the Hades, in my bag. So we'll dive into that a little bit later.
Oh, baby. Come on. Yeah. The fact that it's such a fun world to me that you came in with so much discraft, right? And it's like there are these giants that I'm not in operation. Let's get rid of all the discraft in your bag, because I think if you love a brand, there's a valid reason to stick around with it. But it just shows that y'all, as you're out there trying plastic, if you come in with an open mind, you might literally find a disc that works better for you than something that you've just held on to. You just always assumed, oh yeah, I have to have this in my bag.
Right, yeah. I mean, like, my roaches for putters, nothing's going to replace those. My zones, keeping those. And even, I love my vultures. Nothing flies like those for me right now. So, but yeah, a lot of stuff sneaking in. I think that's good. That's good for this podcast. It's good for my game. It's good for everybody. So I'm excited about it. And, you know, I hear this week, Robbie, I was looking at the my disc bag or whatever the chart was he sent over, and it freaked me out a little bit because the chart was backward, and then I'd realized he was left-handed and he's playing in high elevation. So I'm excited. I don't know these things before we jump into the podcast, so it's going to add an interesting dynamic to the field work I did this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So some definite differences here, and so let's just go ahead and bring in our guest, shall we?
Yep, let's do it.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen, we have in the chat with us Mr. Lincoln Cook. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, I'm stoked to be here. How are you guys?
Doing well, man.
Living the dream. So you are based in Colorado, rocking the Trash Panda hat. We are huge fans
Shout out, Jesse.
of Mr. Jesse Stedman over here. So definitely love that we have some Colorado love. We have some really, I love your back. First off, I just want to say you've got a lot of Castaplast in there. So would love, when we dive into that, I want to hear a little bit like why Casta. So just giving you that as we dive in, because I feel like Castaplast is one of those brands, and I know, Brad, you even talked about it with it coming into the shop. The plastic just feels so good, but it's just not in a lot of people's bags right now. So very, very curious about all of that. And before we dive into your bag, though, we want to get to know you as a player, Lincoln. So how long have you been playing?
I just hit my 3-year anniversary. So I started the summer before COVID. And then, of course, COVID picks everything up. So just hit the anniversary mark, which is kind of fun to look back and celebrate my great form in the beginning.
I hear that. Now, have you been playing in Colorado your whole time?
I learned how to play in Houston, Texas, where it's crazy tight and wooded. And then when the boom happened, I was going to school out in Idaho. So I was in the Boise area. If you've ever played the courses out there, they're actually pretty great. And then have since moved to Colorado and played here the last 2 years.
Okay, so you've really gotten to see the difference in discs as well for that stability and whatnot because of elevation. So that is awesome. All right, so let's talk distance. If you're throwing backhand shots, what's your controlled golf distance? And forehand shots, what's your controlled golf distance?
Yeah, so backhand, I typically don't throw anything faster than a 9-speed. I got baby hands. I haven't figured out how to throw distance drivers well. So fairway drivers are my max distance, and I can push those like 330 to 340. Like pretty comfortably and pretty consistently. And then forehand, I do throw distance drivers, and I can push those, 360 to 370, 380. Okay. So that's like getting full flight out of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you're throwing forehands, for our listeners, I'll try to describe this experience to you. When you're throwing forehands, do you find yourself often on a like sort of vertical release, like as the outer edge on like an Anheuser angle, or are you usually pretty flat or under like hyzer angle on release?
Pretty flat generally, maybe a touch of Annie, but yeah.
Okay.
I should also say that I'm a lefty, so my left-hand forehand is y'all's normal throw.
That's fair. Yes.
Right.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So that's totally fair. Awesome. Well, we're gonna dive into your bag and take a look at it. And so another thing that we're just gonna have to learn about, we even mentioned this in our intro, is some of the conversations that we're gonna have as someone who's not played above sea level very often. Discs My understanding of the disc could be a little different, so I also have checked with
A little bit.
our pro of Jesse and being like, all right, so what's this fly like, things like that. So there's one disc in particular in your bag that, having talked to Jesse about that specific disc, it feels unusable below sea level or at sea level, and I'm just shooketh that it's in your bag. So I'm quite curious, but stay tuned, listeners, because it's going to be fantastic. So we're going to start with mid ranges. You have 3 mid ranges in your bag. You got the Cax and then 2 Origins.
Yes, sir.
So you have a Neo Origin and then the Midnight Prowl, which is Kyle Klein's Tour Series, or Lux Origin. Sorry, Lux Origin. Walk me through the differences between all 3 of those.
Yeah, so the Midnight Prowl, I've got this Midnight Prowl and then a first run Origin, and those I've found to be just more understable than any other run. So those are the ones that I throw on good hyzer angle and let it flip up and turn like all the way over, not turning and burning because they have enough stability that they'll kind of like finish flat or fade out. But they're definitely my hyzer flips to turn shots. Oh.
Series, like, I
And
want to
then,
be a part of that.
yeah, exactly. And then the this Lux one, or I have a prototype one as well. It's my favorite mold, and so I've got lots of different variations of it, and I cycle through them. But typically, I have one that's a little heavier and not as seasoned, and so that one's a little bit straighter for me. So I'll throw it flat, it'll get turned, but then it'll fade back out, especially here in Colorado.
Okay. Awesome.
And then the CAC Z is I treat it like a mid-range, so I'm throwing it for hyzer shots. Sometimes I'll throw it on a little flex shot to get some movement out of it. But yeah, as far as mid-ranges go, I found these 2 molds to be perfect for me.
Awesome. So, have you tried a Geo Origin?
Yes, and they're surprisingly stable,
Interesting.
at least for
Okay.
me. For me, the Geo
Okay.
and the Exosoft Origins were both a little more stable, which was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, because everything that I've experienced, because I have 2 Origins in my bag as well, I found the Geos and the Exosofts to be the most flippy. And then it's like, I went like Geo, Exosoft, Midnight Prowl, like the meta, and then Lux, Neo. Like the stock Neos to me are the most stable out of the whole bunch.
Yeah.
Which I'm great with because I think it gives that alternative. So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure I would just have to beat in one of those baseline ones to get it to be way more understable. But I haven't beat any of the baseline ones in, and I just have my 8 or so Origins that I kind of bounce between. I got my like super understable ones and then my understable ones.
yeah, and I mean, if you're cycling them, I think that's a great show. It's very interesting to me that like 3 mid ranges. So you have these 3 mid ranges, and another thing we had talked about, I believe, is that you like to forehand and backhand most everything in your bag. So do you forehand the Origins as well?
Only if I need to. It's like a get out of jail. But I'll throw it on some steep hyzer on a forehand, and it'll flip up and just completely turn all the way over and never fade back. So it's only if needed.
Okay. All right. That gives me some good insight into your forehand as well. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think there's like room for other bowls to exist in the bag, but at the same time, I think so the Cax sounds like clearly the most overstable option. So I want to take a quick jump from there to your fairways.
Okay.
And walk me through, when is the Cax coming out versus an Escape?
Distance. Escapes are my furthest flying discs right now, backhand. Like if I hit a grace right, I can get it 20 feet further, but generally and consistently, I lean on the escape because I have a lot of confidence and trust with it
Yeah.
that it's just, and my escapes, I've got some that are beat in and they are just very, very straight. And then I've got a couple newer ones that have a little more finish to them.
Okay. Brad, have you thrown an escape before?
I haven't, actually. I haven't thrown a lot of trilogy.
Okay. We're gonna have to get you a try an escape soon. The escape to me, I think would fly very similar to your vulture, not as fast. So I'd be curious because we had even just talked about. I can't remember if it was before we hit record, with you saying like the vulture's a tough one to touch. So I would be very, very curious there. Okay, so distance wise, do you have any fairway drivers that fade in a same vein, Lincoln, as your Cax does?
I've got as you like to call your pig, your precious child.
Yeah.
I've got my precious child FD3 that I've had for a while now.
Yeah.
And this is like, if I just need to trust a shot, like in a tournament play or whatever, I need to make sure that I hit my line. I go with this one. And it's very straight now, but it does still have solid finish to it. So it flies, I would say it's like a little more comparable to like a Thunderbird.
Okay. Yeah.
And I feel like the more that they get beat in, the glidier they are.
For
At least
sure.
Okay.
in my experience. I've got another one sitting in the wall back there too.
Yeah. So you step up and like walk me through. I'm fixated on this Cax because I'm just trying to. If you love the origin and all
Figure
that,
it out.
I'm trying to figure out like, does the Cax get thrown a lot, or is it in there almost as a comfort? It's like a minute hole where you're like, I can't throw my precious child. And an origin's going to be not as stable, so the Cax comes out like it's a comfort pick in your bag.
A little bit. I will say that I've got a similar precious child zone, ESP beat-in zone. It's my favorite zone, and it's just like a stock ESP run. And I can throw it pretty far. Like I almost throw it like a mid-range.
Yeah.
And I throw the Cax Z when I feel like I need to get just a little bit more distance than that zone. And then also when I kind of I don't want to throw a fairway driver. I don't want to push it too far. It is kind of that comfort disc, like you said, and it's not used as often, but I feel like when I use it, I'm always glad that I have it.
That's fair.
I don't know. It's interesting. I saw Hunter throw it and was curious, so I gave it a test run and ended up loving it.
Yeah, and I think there's like in this podcast, I think we could do a disservice to the disc golf community, Brad, and tell me your thoughts on this, because I think that I love our motto, if it's good, keep it in the bag, but I don't think just because a disc is weird that it necessarily has to leave the bag. Like you can have a utility disc because there are just certain shots or natural holes that are going to be made in your bag that it might, you're not going to lead on it that often, but you have it there, like you said, because of that. There's this weird scenario that I probably come across once every other round, once every 3 rounds. And here's my rule. I'll go ahead and make this rule right here. So exclusive. If you have a disc in your bag that you are not using every 3 rounds, you need to reevaluate why it's in your bag.
I'd agree with that. I think too, we talk a lot about like mold minimalization. We talk a lot about like from a comfort perspective, from like a feel and like, subconscious confidence perspective. But, I think it's okay to have those discs. But like you said, we just more want people to think about them. Just think about why it's in there. Think about why you would do, 4 origins versus 3 origins in this Cax Z that you're talking about. Just like, why are you doing it? If it makes sense, if there's something that you're finding yourself needing it for all the time, then sure, keep it in. It's good. Keep it in there. But if it's just in there for fun, why is it in there? I mean, I had a Zeus in my bag for a long time, and it was only because, well, if it gets really windy and I need to make sure that fades out, it was just like this what if scenario, and I threw it maybe twice in the 6 months that I carried it. So it was just wasting bag space that I could put in another mold or something I'm trying to work in, or two of the same mold that I love. And it was just taking up space in my bag. So I think the moral of the story, Robbie, is you're right. Just evaluate why it's there. And if it makes sense, I have a Raptor in my bag that I don't really throw. It's a strict utility shot. But if I need a thumber, like that's the disc I'm going to, and that's why it exists.
Yeah.
So I keep it in there because of that specifically. So we just want people to think about
Yeah.
why stuff's in their bag. That's all.
For sure. Okay. So
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lincoln.
Sorry, real quick to add to that, I often will keep a box of discs in my car, and depending on the course that I'll play will kind of depend on the different discs that might come in and out. There's a couple courses where I don't even take a Grace there because I don't have a need for it. And so those ones I'll kind of, add it in a couple of maybe more fun putters or mid, stuff like that. I've got, a super beat up Fierce that you throw on this angle and it still flips up and turns. So like there are definitely courses and rounds where you need something or don't need something. And so I think there is a world where that kind of like understanding maybe the slight expansion of your bag and also the slight decompression of your bag is a good thing to know.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's talk approach discs because it's definitely its own category. You got 3 zones.
Did we finish out the fairway drivers?
Fairway drivers.
We good there?
I feel like we're gonna be coming back to it when we talk about distance drivers because the focus is going to be on distance drivers.
Okay.
I guess a slight touch would be because looking at it, some of this, it's like I want to make sure that we're spending time where we need. But
Sure.
the slight clarification difference between the Falk and the Maverick for you.
Maverick is definitely not the distance potential. It's like a longer origin for me.
Okay.
And the Falk it doesn't stay in my bag all the time, but I find the Falk is more understable than the Escapes, even like my beat-in Escapes, and it holds a turnover line a lot longer.
Yeah.
And so when I need those, bigger panning shots that I don't want to throw a forehand on, that's when I use the Falk to get that understable panning flight. And granted, this is in Colorado, so if I drop down to Alabama, I don't even know if it'd be in the bag. So we'd have to see at that point, but.
That's fair. I mean, my guy Jesse came and visited, and the first throw he made, he was like, "Yeah, this is one of my more stable rates," and he turned it straight over into a lake.
Yep.
R.I.P. that rate. So, totally get that. Totally get that. All right, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. I genuinely love how many Escapes you have in your bag, and I love that you found a mold that you really like. Taking an Escape, which is a generally neutral to, I wouldn't even call it overstable. I would just call it straight up neutral because I feel like it's definitely not flippy, even at our elevation, but it's also not like, oh yeah, this thing's a meat hook either. I think it's just a really good, if I were dynamic and I was making beginner packs, I'd put the Escape in there. Oh wait, they already did. So like that makes total sense in the premium plastics. You've got it in a variety of plastics. You've got it in base yeah, it's so good. So I think you're doing the right thing on fairways. And that's what I think what even intrigued me the most about bringing you on was you talked about how much you love the Escape. So what I wanted to do was find a distance driver for you that fills that role. And a spoiler, I actually don't think it's the Grace.
Okay.
We're gonna put on the boxing gloves here in a second and talk about the Grace.
Cool.
But
I'm excited to hear
the putt and approach area. You've combined the in the bag podcast love. You have a pig, and then you have 3 zones in your bag. So
sometimes,
yeah, that's fair. Walk us through.
Yeah.
You said Precious Child ESP zone, and then looks like a ESP swirl and a Jawbreaker zone.
Yeah, so I have tried all the different approach discs that they've come. Actually, no, there's a bunch of new ones like the Yarn and the Culprit that I haven't tried out yet. but that's because I'm too invested in the zones at this point.
It's fair.
But I couldn't find a disc that I liked better than the zones. I've got this ESP Swirl one is just, it's beefy. Even now I've had it. It's a 2019 Tour Series and it's still just beefy. This beautiful ESP one is still stable, but not overstable, and it has a ton of glide now. And then I typically keep those two in the bag, and I'm messing around right now with the Jawbreaker Zone again because these pigs, as I'm sure you know, Robbie, are a little pricey to come by.
Yep.
So if I happen to lose this, which I would definitely cry and go in the water and spend a half a day looking for it, I'm working on kind of messing with the Jawbreaker Zone again, just for that less stable forehand approach shot, that'll stick right by the basket. And this one's nice and puddle top. And I mean, I just love the zone as it is, but there's something about the pig I can't quit, as you understand.
And you have a 2020 Ricky Pig, the tank one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They are. Whew. Yep. They are pricey.
This one is perfectly flat, and just because they didn't all come out flat, so this one's perfect.
Yep. The 2020 run is my precious child is from the 2020 runs. So I know pig runs better than I know any other run that is out there. So I'm with you on that. But Brad can definitely highlight on the zone world.
Zone life.
Mm-hmm. Good disc, you know.
Yeah. So I think there's room for both. One of the reasons that I love the pig is because I think the pig flies like a putter. When I throw the zone, I find the zone to fly like a mid-range, because when you come off of your zone, that mid-range speed takes over, which makes it more overstable. Whereas I feel like when you come off of a pig, it doesn't get more overstable just because you took speed off of it. So I think there's room, but I think you're on the right track as well of like, you can throw the pig with confidence because you know you have that Jawbreaker to back it up in that case. So you're moving in the right direction there. And hear me once again, I can't for 2 episodes in a row say that we need to take pigs out of the bag. I morally feel wrong about that. So not going to get me to say it twice, y'all. So putters, you're putting with links, and then you throw links as well.
Absolutely.
So we're a Discmania guy. I love it. And new Discmania even. So
yeah, it's kind of funny. Being in Colorado, Discmania tends to have a strong presence here, and I got on the full bandwagon. I'm a full Discmania, and that's actually how I found the escape, was that CD2s were impossible to come by, and I dunked 2 of my CD2s in a pond and couldn't find them, and came back to the escape that I'd had forever ago and was like, oh, this flies just like a CD2, and fell in love with it that way. But yeah, actually I like the newer stuff, or the Evolution line stuff with Discmania, minus the FD3 from the Color Glow runs. But yeah, the link is, my name is Lincoln, and as I looked through, I tried like 12 different putters, and I found a putter called the Link, and I was like, well, why not? We'll just try it. So I ordered a couple, and immediately I loved it. Like, it actually felt perfect for me. I like the bead, gives me a place to rest. I'm a spin putter, so I get some good snap, and I've got multiple different plastics of links to kind of fit those different shot shapes.
I'll be honest, this is not a Link, but the Exosoft Logic had me thinking about switching to Exosoft Logics. That's how good those feel, Robbie. I don't know if you felt one or not, but
they're nice.
Oh my. Yeah, I was like, do I want to buy 20 of these? I might, because they feel so good. But still Roach guy. I've got all those practice ones, and just it feels good still. So maybe one day, but right now we're staying with the Roach. Hey, Lincoln, while we're thinking about it, we didn't talk about your putting in the beginning. Give us a little rundown of your putting from 15 feet, 30 feet, and 40. I'm sorry, 15 feet, 25 feet, and 40 feet.
Yeah, so I did a little test run outside to give accurate numbers, and I also texted a buddy of mine and said, hey, just based on you playing with me, what would you say? And we said 9 out of 10 for 15 feet, just because nobody's perfect, and
for sure,
happens. From 25 feet, I'm like a pretty consistent 8 out of 10. That's if I'm in the circle, that's like my strength. And then from 40 feet, like 4 to 5 out of 10.
That's
And that's not jump putting or step putting.
yeah. I feel like as a spin putter, something that we haven't talked about in these episodes is that I would be willing to bet that 90% of the guests we've had on are not spin putters. And I think if you're a spin putter, you have to have way more confidence than a push putter, because if you miss and you airball on a spin putt, you have a 25 footer guaranteed. So like, I have a friend who is super good at spin putting, and I had to I asked them like, yeah, how do you step up to that 25-foot comebacker and not be nervous? And they're like, well, I had just the same odds as making it as I did the 60-footer back there. And I'm like, huh. That is not how I feel about my putting at all. But congratulations to you. That's super cool. So it makes a ton of sense, especially hearing spin putter. And I'd be willing to bet that you probably actually get even better at putting when you come down out of elevation, because you don't have to discs are just going to loft more on your putt. So
Really?
So yeah,
We'll
because
see.
when you're at elevation, it drops. Like everything just drops. That's why the Pro Tour and all that, they were talking about for putting, they felt like they just had to get so much more pop on their putts because of the spin needed to keep it in the air. So
Interesting.
Physics.
be prepared.
Well,
Science.
we'll see.
Yeah,
Mathematics.
Just move out of Colorado and you're 1,000 rated.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. And I guess, Brad, we just need to move to
I guess so.
elevation and the hyperbolic
Practice for a
time
couple
chamber.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll help me probably. I need all the help I can
That's why
get.
the Olympic athletes train in Colorado Springs for the elevation, right?
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true.
So let's go ahead and let's dive into the meat on the bone here. Let's talk about some distance drivers. So, first disc that we have to glance past, the Rask. Double rim daddy. Here we go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, terrible disc, man. Why is that even in there?
It is. I kind of got it as a joke because I was like, oh, this actually kind of feels good forehand. Why not? Let's have some fun. And it's just everybody's got the beefy disc in their bag that they go to occasionally. And I actually find that I use it more often than I thought I would, because I do have a tendency to try to juice my distance drivers forehand. And in trying to get that little extra juice, sometimes I'll overturn it just a touch. And this disc is very difficult to overturn. So it is kind of the anomaly in my bag, but I can't quit the K1 plastic, and I oddly kind of fell in love with this disc.
Hey, that's
Love-
okay.
So it's not in the bag every round, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
it does come out
love
occasionally.
Castoplast, love K1 plastic, especially the K1 soft plastic. I can get behind everything, but I picked up that disc and I shuddered and threw it out of my hand. I'm like, get this away from me. But I guess it makes sense for, again, if it makes sense, that's fine. But I think someone down here on sea level, I don't know how anyone, that's like the most beefy thing I've ever seen, and it's uncomfortable. But I could see where it's built with those double grooves. I can see where it's built for more of a forehand dominant player. That makes sense to me, I suppose.
I've never thrown it backhand. I just realized.
I don't know that you can. Your
I have no
arm,
idea.
your fingers would literally be chopped in half. So I don't know how you would do
Fair.
that.
And I will tell you, even hearing that, hey, this is, I throw it more often than I would think because I juice. That right there gives me insight into how your forehands come out, because traditionally, that's why I asked that question at the beginning of he's throwing forehands, his lefty forehand, with that Anheuser angle, the outer edge being high, because I think a lot of people, when they go to learn forehands, that's how they start getting their max distance, is they karate chop them and throw them like baseballs. And the issue with that being, right, it's going to naturally have you rolling your wrist and finishing faster. So understable stuff is going to be harder to get to go that distance. Which is why I think so you have an Enigma in your bag.
Yep.
How does that compare to your orange first run Grace?
It definitely has further distance potential, and it's not as overstable. I don't know what it is about this first run Orange Grace, but it's randomly beefy, but I have a first run Blue Grace that's not.
I
So
can confirm.
I actually asked the Latitude 64 community. I was like, hey, is there a reason this orange one is so overstable? And they're like, oh yeah, that's the most overstable run. Blue's the least, orange the most. So that's when I ventured out and got a blue one too.
Yep. I have both in my basement and have found the exact same thing to be true. I threw the Grace. I got a blue first run because I thought it was way prettier than the orange. I threw it for 2 rounds, and then at the end of the second round, it was like turning over on me in a dramatic fashion. And I was like, oh, I'll just go get another one. So I went to the shop and I bought an orange one. Nope. I've played like 10 rounds with it, and I still can't get that thing to flip. It is wild how much more overstable they are. So that's
Doesn't
I'm
make
very
sense.
curious on that. Yeah, very very curious. So here's my thing that why we talk distance drivers. So you mentioned earlier on, if you're throwing your escapes furthest flying backhand disc, if you really crush your Grace, you can get like 20 more feet on it. But the issue is, right, when you go to throw that Grace, you have to hit it harder. You have to hit it with more angle, things like that. So what I want to look at is, and I had Brad go out and try, because Brad, I wouldn't say that you would call yourself a bomber by any means.
No, not even close.
And in a similar world of like the clearing the 340 backhand distance range, like anything beyond that is a crush for you. And we're doing work.
Yep.
So I had Brad go out and try 2 Trilogy discs, because with you loving the Evolution plastic and with you loving Trilogy, I wanted to keep you in the same family. Of he's not like, this isn't a similar to, it's not like the last episode where it was all gyro or whatever. But he has a lot of plastic in there, and even the Castoplast, y'all. I mean, that might be changing here in a little bit with the fact that Trilogy owns Casta now. So, wanted to keep you in that family. But what I was looking for was, because I have found the Grace, because it only exists in a certain amount of plastics right now. The thing about the Grace is you have to find those niche runs in order to get the different flights out of it. So, like, you have a different flight in your blue one versus your orange one. And then the Kristens with the wolf stamp live in the middle. And it's a beautiful disc, like, so good. But then it probably flies somewhat close to your Enigma, maybe easier to throw than your Enigma, more glidey than your Enigma. There's a lot of options there, right? So what I wanted Brad to do is I wanted Brad to try a disc that I believe is inherently less stable than the Grace. So, and the reason being, it's inherently less stable, but it also comes in a variety of plastics, so that if you throw this mold and it fits your hand or it works, you could easily find variants because it exists in a bunch of different plastic types, versus, hey, I'm throwing this, like, and I have to find the first run orange ones because they're the only things that fly like that Grace. So, Brad, what 2 discs did we try?
All right. So today, Robbie sent me out to try the Trespass from Dynamic, and then the West Side Sword. Something I want to note here, they're both 173 grams, so very similar discs, but not similar. Flight numbers are almost identical. The Trespass has one more degree of fade than the Sword does, but they're almost the identical discs. I mean, they're both Trilogy discs, right? But they do fly very differently, and in my mind, after field testing them, they would almost fit 2 different slots in my bag personally. So, very interesting experiment. First, like, thoughts on feel, because, you know, I'm a big, like, it has to feel good before I throw it. They both feel really good. I like the VIP plastic. I like the Lucid plastic in a driver. I don't know how I feel about it. You know, in the lower speeds with drivers, I tend to like something like that. They're grippy in my hand. They both feel good. They're both, like, they flex in my hand, but they're not, like, so gummy like a K1 Soft, right? They're still gummy enough that I feel like I can grip into them. I will note, you know, I have I have big hands, but I have like sausage fingers. My fingers are thick, right? So although I have bigger hands, like a 12 speed really feels like the max comfortable width for me, between like not my fingers not being crushed, but also like not too cramped. So I think the 12 speed is like my max. Plus, I don't feel like my arm speed's quite above the 12 speed range. Um, the sword definitely is more domey than the trespass. I'll note that a little bit more later, but both felt really good in my hand. I wasn't upset with either one of them. Um, I'm happy to note that this was a field test that I really did enjoy both the discs, which, the last 2 episodes I've not really enjoyed either one. So regardless of whatever one Robbie recommends to you at the end of this, I think you're getting a good disc today. They're both making me think about like my bag a little bit and spots that I might be missing, or a spot that maybe this disc could cover 2 spots instead of 1 versus the discs I have in there are only covering 1 spot. So also final note that I'll make is I'm nursing a shoulder injury, so I'm only throwing these at about 75% power max, and I've really slowed down my form. But what I think has really been highlighted here is I'm still getting the distance that I want, and I'm not trying to smash each one of these. I'm actually finding more consistent results. So lesson learned there. Let's talk about flat backhand. The sword, I was able to get out consistently to like the 360 mark, 360, 365. Trespass about 350, and that's at about 75% power. I went out to this field test. I even text Robbie after he recommended them to me, and I was like, dude, what are you doing to me? Because they seem like relatively overstable, not like Firebird overstable, but they seem, based on flight numbers, pretty overstable, right? And they're 12 speeds, so I'm just automatically thinking I'm not going to be able to throw these. I'm going to have 3 frustrating weeks of this podcast in a row, and I'm like, I almost can't take this, Robbie. He's like, no, just lower your expectations, go out and go try them. So I did. So the first one, I was like, well, here's the sword, let's just go. So did a little stretch, little warm up, boom, threw the sword, and it immediately went right out of my hand. So it turned immediately. And I was shocked because based on the flight numbers, it's negative 0.5 turn. So I don't really expect a 12 speed at negative 0.5 turn to actually turn for me. At the very most, I expect it to go straight-ish, right? But the sword immediately went right out of my hand. It turned for a long time, and then just kind of rode a straight line, and then still faded back across the center line. So I was like, okay, maybe the trespass is going to do that. Maybe I got a bad throw on this sword or something like that. Maybe I annied it and didn't realize it. Through the trespass, although it didn't turn immediately out of my hand, it just basically went dead straight for a very long time and then came back. It didn't fade too hard. It just faded a little bit at the end. So I was very surprised, and I threw them multiple times, and every time I was getting these flights. The sword would turn right out of my hand, the trespass would go very straight for a long time and fade out at the end for the last like 80 feet or so. So yeah, I was getting a lot more distance than I expected. They were like less stable than I expected, so it was like a very pleasant surprise. And I'm not throwing these super hard to get that distance too. They did want to stay in the air. The glide was nice out of both of the discs. I'll come to the Anheuser one last, just because I kind of had like a revelation a little bit with an Anheuser shot. So I'll go to the Heiser. Obviously, Heiser backhand, you probably know what to expect, all that, right? Neither one of them like flipped up to flat for me. I couldn't get any of them to Heiser flip. But what I was able to do is they like kind of just rode a Heiser line for about 270 feet. That's about max distance I could get out of them both on Heiser. Neither one of them just like dove to the ground, but neither one of them would flip. So just a consistent, I don't know, maybe kind of like a utility shot, maybe need to get around something, but I still need a little bit of distance and a pushing Heiser. That would be that kind of shot. But yeah, they didn't really fight out of the Heiser line, but they just kept it the whole time. So Anheuser backhand, this is where they both kind of started like maybe looking a little different for me. The Anheuser backhand on the trespass, I would get about 320. The sword, I could get about 350. There's a couple I pushed 400 on, like the 380-ish range. And it was really interesting because the trespass was a little hard for me to figure out as far as my line. I didn't feel like it took me a few throws to figure out the nose angle, like what was too much anhyzer, what was not enough anhyzer. I could get both of these discs to do this big, like sweeping anhyzer that just kind of went level and just sat gently on the ground. And for me, I've been trying to get that kind of flight with a very understable disc, so like a diamond or like my uplink, right? I want that like big sweeping ante shot if I need, because I'm not a strong forehand player, so I want that big sweeping, a left to right motion. And I thought understable was the way to go on that. But what was interesting and the thought that I had was like the sword, for instance, it went a long ways. It just like did a gentle fade with not. It was enough ante that I felt like I was throwing ante, but I didn't have to put a ton on it, and it just kind of did that sweeping motion the whole time, and it was stable enough that it didn't like turn and burn on me, but it was also not stable enough that it flipped over and like came back to the left. So, and it landed gently every time. I didn't have a single roll away when it hit the ground. Both of them landed. I would say the difference in the trespass was where it's a little more stable, and I didn't get enough distance. I didn't get as much distance because at the very end, it's like it wanted to fight out, but didn't have enough spin to fight out. Just kind of sat down. It just didn't give me that extra push. So, Robbie, I'm sure you have some stuff to say about that. I'll go to the forehand and wrap this up, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that particular shot. Forehand. The sword I did not like on forehand at all, to be honest with you. It was okay, but I don't know why. I really struggle with the nose angle on that on forehand. I kept throwing it nose up, and I don't know if it just where it was like domey, and I just wasn't like getting the thumb pressure that I really wanted. So I kept releasing kind of nose up, and it would sky out and just fade to the left for me on right hand. The trespass felt really good. I've been forehanding a thrasher a lot because it gave me, I could release it on hyzer, and it would kind of hyzer flips for me and even turns a little bit, then comes back to the right. That's great, but I played New London Tech here the other day, and I don't have that much room to play with on a wooded course. In a big open field, it's fine to have that big flex line, but on a wooded course like that, it's a little scary to have something do like that much of a flex. The trespass has like the finishing, I guess, if I'm thinking about where I want this disc to finish on forehand, it has just a dead straight flight on forehand. And then I wrote down a perfect J shape, which is what I want from the thrasher, right? But I have to kind of finagle the hyzer angle. The trespass, just if I released it flat on forehand, it went dead straight for me with a consistent fade at the end. So I was very pleased, and it felt very comfortable in my hand, which is, the forehand struggles real here with feel and with throw. So was very impressed. I mean, I still only threw it like 270 feet. But what I'm trying to do is, I've traditionally I'm a standstill forehand person because I don't really have a great forehand. But I think like nursing the shoulder injuries, what it's forcing me to do is I'm adding a little crow hop in to kind of like generate some more power without like this huge snap of my arm. And no, it felt good and it didn't feel uncomfortable. And 270 for a forehand for me right now is perfectly fine. So I did feel comfortable. And what's nice about this compared to my thrasher is like, my thrasher I'm really only throwing on forehand. The trespass, I think I could get comfortable with throwing backhand and forehand, which I know is something, Lincoln, for you that you're like, hey, I really want to be able to throw these discs multiple ways. So yeah. To summarize it all, the big takeaway is, although they're in the same family as far as company, they're very similar plastics, they're very, very similar flight numbers, they are still very different discs, and they can even do different things for you. So for sure. Again, just as I'm learning and coming out of my like newness to this, it's interesting to see that, looks can be deceiving, feel can be deceiving. You just have to go out and actually do it, and maybe have a smart buddy that tells you, hey, just go throw it, just go try, right? So that is interesting, and they're very similar flight numbers, but they could fit different spots in my bag. That's very interesting. I think this is a key takeaway, but understable is not necessarily the answer for like this Anheuser shot that I'm dreaming of. You know what I mean? This, for me, a backhanded player that does not have a forehand, a left to right motion, soft landing shot. So, Lincoln, for you, a right to left motion that, has a soft landing kind of flight. Again, I thought understable was the answer there, but understable discs for me tend to be a little tricky because I'm just still pretty new at this. Whereas these discs were maybe a little more forgiving on the Anheuser angle to do that big sweeping shot. And then obviously third is a no-brainer, but I just have to say it as someone who's just trying week over week to be better at disc golf, just like everybody else, that raw power and just chucking a disc is not the answer to distance. It is good form, slowing the pace of your throw, and making sure your mechanics line up. So that's really for me. I need to say that out loud, but for anyone else that's listening that needs to feel the same way, I'm here for you. I'm feeling it too. Yeah. So,
sure.
Yeah, that's kind of my takeaway. So,
Yeah.
Lincoln, how do you feel about that?
So I've messed around with the trespass, and I was using it for quite a while until I lost the 2 that I had, and then I went to the Discmania shift, and I traded away a couple trespasses to try and get a cool Discmania disc that cost way too much money, and
Classic.
ended up trading away way too much value. Turns out he and I are buddies now, so we joke about it. But no, I loved the trespass for a long time. Part of why I moved down towards the Grace in terms of the 11 speed versus the 12 speed was just because of like the rim width, and I liked the Wraith for a long time too, because the Wraith, like, just a little bit smaller, felt a little bit more comfortable on the backhand. But I always found my trespasses were still kind of like you said, that stable. Like, people say they're understable, but they're not really. They just go super straight and fade out. But I've actually never messed around with an S word, as people like to call it.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, I don't know if it would be the forehand disc, just because it does have a little bit more dome to it. But yeah, I haven't thrown one of those.
Yeah. So
not yet, anyways.
I would be very curious. I think the sword might be the answer then, especially hearing that you had some time with a Wraith in the past. As someone who, like, the Wraith is my favorite distance driver of all time. The description that I hear often for the sword is that the sword starts like a beat-in Wraith.
That's what I've heard about the Grace, which is why I went Grace. So
yeah,
it's interesting. We'll have to test that theory.
I would be very, very curious. And the other cool part about the sword is that the sword does come in orbit plastic as well. So if you want that same touch of your Kristen Grace, basically the same plastic, so you wouldn't be losing the tactile feel of that heading to a sword. Yeah, I would be, if you're willing to try it with an open mind, and I'm also that guy that, like, totally understands the world of, hey, I'm in on this mold. Like, I have bought so many of this mold. That's why I really encourage beginners, and really, if you've not been around the sport for a super long time, before you go crazy and buy a bunch of one mold or whatever, try as many as you can. When you're playing with friends, throw the stuff in their bag, because then you get to feel it and be like, oh, wait, like, this is actually super good and it works for me. So we don't end up in a world, right, where, like, you have a bill. I'm sure between the three of us, between Roaches, EMAC judges, and Links, we probably have 60, 80 discs just among those 3 molds. So like, none of us are changing. Even if I stepped up and I tried another putter and it started working, the mental toll of, I already have so many of these. Why would I switch? It's not that much of a difference. So it's very curious. Like, it's an interesting mental prison we put ourselves in. But I would be very, very, very curious, because the other, like I said, cool part about the sword is, if you, let's say you try the sword and you have similar results of the Grace. Even I could argue, like, if it remotely touches the Grace. The cool part about the sword is you can try the sword in VIPX. You can try the sword in Air. You could try the sword in tournament plastic. You could try the sword in orbit plastic. Like,
Hmm.
there's 4 variances that exist with just that VIP sword. Whereas the Grace right now, that just doesn't exist.
Right.
So if this puts us on the same level at all, there's that world of truly, wow, how many more options could be out there. And also understanding you've thrown your graces a lot. So if you walk in and you're like, hey, I'm going to give this sword one fieldwork session, and then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If you're willing, we would love to send you this sword. And what I would vote for is take it to a fieldwork session, and then either if it flies closer to your first run or your Kristen or your first run blue, like whatever that is, take that option out and try to lean on the sword for a week or two. If you're going to play
Oh,
5 or 6
absolutely.
rounds, give it that test. And then if you'd be willing, we'd love to have you back on to see if Brad and I are just way out in left field, or does the sword actually hold up against the Grace?
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, I will say one thing that you said sold me on the sword more than the trespass. One, I have some experience with the trespass, but two, you said when you threw it on that Anheuser and it just held that Anheuser and it wasn't an understable disc that you got to do that. That was the thing that sold me because I've thrown like Avenger SS's and Heats and understable discs, and the inconsistency of the understability or the inconsistency of the thrower with an understable disc uh, is kind of why I go more forehand, backhand, and not as much the super understable stuff.
Hmm.
So just hearing you say that was like, ooh, that might be exactly what I need then for that, pushing that max distance, trying to, I'm still trying to break 400.
Yeah.
I'm a long ways away, but
I I
we're
th-
trying.
I think with a little bit of healing and just some continued form work, I feel like I could push this sword to that distance. And this is why, and I can't believe I'm going to say this. I told Robbie this before the podcast. The sword is really making me doubt my Hades, and anyone who has listened to this podcast knows how much I love
Yeah.
the Hades. But the sword is flying. So I have a 155-gram Hades that flies like I think a Hades should because of the weight, right? My
Sure.
173-gram Hades does not fly like I want. What I'm looking at the flight numbers, it does not fly like the Hades I know should. Or if Hunter throws the Hades or someone else, you know what I mean? My Hades do not fly that way because I'm not that kind of. I don't have that power. I have to go all the way down to 155, which is very hard to find. I've seen 2 of them in the 1,200 Hades that have come through this warehouse in the last 6 months, right? So that tells you the ratio. But
Yeah.
the sword at 173 grams flies exactly like I think that Hades should fly, and it really got me excited about it. It really is making me think that I need to get different plastics like Robbie's talking about and just see the difference in those. But I might just like take a few out of the warehouse here this week and spend some time with them this weekend and see, is this the disc that finally takes out the Hades in my bag? It's a little scary, but I love having a disc that I know can do multiple things. For me, my Hades right now just is a distance driver. It's not going to be any sort of utility. It's not going to give me any other shot right now but a max distance shot. Whereas the sword, I know, coming back to your point, can give me a max distance shot, but it also can give me this Annie shot that I'm really struggling finding. And I threw that Annie shot so many times in the field, and I didn't screw it up. I mean, anything I can't screw up is a win right now, especially with the Anheuser angle. Again, it's a shot that I'm learning. The trespass was fine, but it was trickier to find the angle. You know what I mean? So I'm all about a disc that can cover multiple spaces in my bag, but also give me some confidence and fly like I know it's supposed to fly like.
Yeah. And I'll give you.
Yeah, for sure. And
Go ahead.
sorry, I think the sword can be a good complement with the Enigma, whereas I can lean on the Enigma forehand. And with that dominess of the sword, I don't think that I would enjoy it forehand. I mean, I'm still gonna give it a shot for sure, but I am interested to know for you how it flew in Virginia compared to Colorado, and seeing uh, how much turn I can actually get out of that thing. But Yeah, I'm excited to try it. And if you want to throw any other swords my way, you're more than welcome to do that too. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And something I would even like as a note for our audience who are like hearing that, I always want to leave y'all with as many tips as we can. Uh, we've talked about it now twice now, but like when you're throwing your forehands, are you anti, flat, whatever? Um, if you're coming in with a little anhyzer, it like if I were trying to work with someone who has a natural anhyzer release on their forehand or a natural anhyzer release on the backhand, I wouldn't jump them all the way to an understable disc. And the reason being because, like y'all said, the punishment is so much higher on that. Like if you get too much on the turnover, she's gonna roll over. But
right,
obviously, if you try to throw, like, let's say you master this turnover angle, okay, cool, you're feeling really good about it, and then you step up and try to throw your rask on that same angle. That's a terrible idea. Because first off, you're throwing a rask, and then second, you're throwing like something that overstable on that angle, right? So why like what we want to do is we want to find something that lives in that neutral category. If I'm working with beginners, I love to hand them neutral discs as often as possible because it just teaches you so much about the game and on that. And I think the sword, the flight numbers are misrepresented as we like as you've mentioned, Brad. So it's going to have that neutrality of trying to fight, but it's also a high speed disc. So that natural speed to it is going to help you in the long run and a wide like so much. And then if you want more distance, once again, get a VIP air sword, and you're going to throw that turnover, and it's just going to hold forever. And you
sure.
can power on it, turn it into a roller. Like there's so much flexibility. So I'm very, very excited for you to try this. And then also, you could always de-dope things. That is a very real thing. If a disc is too domey for you, there are methods that exist to take the dome out of a disc. So
That's what accounting textbooks are good for, right?
yeah, right. Get some hot water, boil some water, get a little paintbrush, paint the top of the disc, paint that boiling water on top of it, flip it over, set it down, and then put some textbooks on top of it. You'll flatten a disc out real fast. That's what all. That's how I get stock run R Pro pigs that I just get to
To
be
be
super
flat.
flat is because
Yep,
yeah, I've never been a dummy pig that isn't going to make it to the farm. Well,
for
And
sure.
if
No,
Lincoln,
and if
I've
sorry, and if you ruin your disc trying this, you can find more at foundationdisc.com. Continue.
absolutely, absolutely. We're not trying to
that's
burn holes
perfect.
in the discs. Well, Lincoln,
No,
we
I
really
will say
appreciate you, man.
appreciate your guys. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Appreciate your
I'm with you.
insight. I'm excited to test this out and report back. Uh, I I do naturally throw my forehands pretty flat. I just tend to get that little juice when you're like, all right, I'm trying to push this 380. Just get that little bit of extra to it. But I forehand my escapes and my graces and throw them with that controlled flip up. And at least up here in Colorado, I don't know if I can do that down at low elevation. That might be a different game, but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. And I'd try the sword on that flip up angle. I bet
Yeah,
it'll be a fun ride. So, Lincoln, seriously appreciate you a lot, man, and looking forward to having
cool.
you on in a future episode.
Y'all are awesome. Thanks so much.
All right,
Thanks,
see you
Lincoln.
next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Here we go. Another we 2 for 2 on like pure distance driver episodes of getting you a disc that I feel like you've enjoyed. Brad?
Yeah, and I don't know why. I really have. I think I'm like, that's maybe the spot that I'm searching for, but I know what I'm looking for. Whereas like my fairway driver category, like I don't really know what I'm looking for yet. So the distance category is good, and again, I'm looking for a disc that I can use for multiple shots, so I don't feel like I'm wasting a ton of space in my bag. So
Yeah.
no, it's a great episode. I really enjoyed both of them. I'm going to try them both out a little bit more and see if they like actually make the bag. But I don't think I have any trilogy right now. Yeah, I don't have any trilogy in my bag, so it'd be nice to put some in here finally.
Yeah, and I will say I think that as a disc golf community, especially speaking from the coaches side of it, I think we try to scare people out of distance drivers a lot of like, hey, don't throw them, don't throw them, don't throw them. So you walk in with some really negative expectations before you even throw it. And there's a world that there are better discs out for you than the distance drivers, like no doubt. But I also think there's room for distance drivers in your bag for you to throw them and love them. So we just got to change that stigma, and hopefully we can do that here on the In the Bag podcast.
And it's just finding the right one too, right? And just being educated enough to know what's smart to throw versus, I'm not still. I mean, I know there's nothing wrong with a destroyer, right? But I'm still not in the place where I feel like that's the disc I need in my hand, even though it's like an iconic disc, right? It's an iconic distance driver. It's just not where I am yet. One day I'll get there, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just love, this more neutral to understable category and just learn to throw those. So, no, I agree with you. So there's definitely a spot for a distance driver, even in an amateur, like beginner player's bag. It's just the right one you have to find.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of finding the right one, what's new in the warehouse over at Foundation Discs?
All right. Well, so at the time of this releasing, there was some new Tour Series trilogy, ironically enough, releasing at the warehouse. I mean, we have some Gavin Rathbun. We have some really cool maidens that were released as well, Matio maidens. They have the fleur-de-lis on them, pretty cool looking discs. I believe we have the Raider coming out in Lucid Chameleon, so that's pretty neat. So yeah, they're good looking discs too. So yeah, check those out if there's still any left when this releases. The big release, I should have worn my shirt. I don't know what I was thinking, but we have Foundation. We have the Bogey Bro shirt releasing this week on Friday when you're listening to this, and also the Foundation American flag stamp shirts releasing as well. So make sure you check out. There's not a ton of those, so get them while they are here. They are pretty hot items. At least last year they were. So make sure you grab them while you can. Other than that, mint discs. Just got them in today. I think they will be up Friday, but finally got some lobsters in. So I know people were searching for those on the site, but we got them in, and some more bobcats. I know bobcat's very zone-esque, but Connor's fist pumping in the background. He loves his bobcat. He threw it all over the place yesterday.
Did y'all get the Taco Cat bobcats?
No, not yet. I was very upset they were sold out, but it's got a place in my bag just for Taco Cat sake.
Dude, the bobcat is fire. Seriously, if you guys don't have an answer in your overstable putt and approach slot or whatever, definitely check out the bobcat. That thing is muddy.
Mm-hmm. Also forgot Yukon disc. We got our first shipment of Yukon in this week. It's already been posted. Twin Swords are going like crazy. We have those watermelon stamp ones, but a lot of good plastic from Yukon. It's interesting. You feel their dragon plastic, and you're like, this feels like active premium. Well, that's because it is. So, a lot of good molds there. Check those out as well. And we still have a few Clash discs, so look at those. We're trying to get some of these smaller companies, these more niche companies, in so you all have access to them all in one spot. So
awesome. Well, hey, I am excited for y'all to try out some of that smaller plastic. Like the smaller companies, I would say 5 years ago, smaller companies, it was like, there's a drop in quality when you're going to pick these discs up. But more and more, they feel so good. Especially that Clash plastic is so good. I've had 2 Clash discs that have already made their way into my bag simply from shooting one video with them. So
yeah, that's awesome.
I'm here for it. So y'all, we appreciate you as always. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in every single week. It continues to blow my mind that y'all are willing to just listen to 2 dudes talk about some plastic and try to help build y'all's bag as best we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the meantime, let's give away this trespass. Who are we going to give the trespass away to, Robbie?
Let's give the trespass away to we're talking. Okay,
I have an idea.
Okay, fire away. Right. Yeah, go for it.
Hey, without talking about it, we're going to combine our 2 ideas. Ready? My idea was whoever comments in the comment that's been playing the least amount of time. What was yours, Robbie?
My comment was going to be in terms of like fall fashion, or you guys have those shirts coming out, American, like who bags an American like tie-dye disc.
Okay.
So let's say, let's meet in the middle, and here's where we're going to say, who has most recently purchased an American flag or had an American tie-dye disc put in their bag.
Boom. Love
or
it.
know someone. We'll even open it up. You know someone that recently put one in there. let us know when that disc got added to their bag.
Yep, and you will get this Lucid Trespass. It's pure white, great for dyeing. So you can maybe dye this one American flag.
Ooh, that'd be a creative get. And you'd be like, oh, I'm the most recent because I'm going to turn that one into. That would be cool. Hit us with your dyeing accounts. Well, y'all, if it's good, remember, if it's good,
Keep it in the bag. We'll see you all next week for episode 14. Take care.
14.